Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Video Scores Volume 1. Today we're going to take a look at What Is Hip by Tower Power, one of my all-time favorite horn bands. Very unique, from Oakland. And being from Eugene, growing up in Eugene, in a little college town, they were always coming up there to do gigs. And it was great. I loved them. Me and my brother would go, and it would be festival seating, and we'd get like really close, and we'd stand like right in front of the horn section, right? We knew all the riffs, and I think we probably drove them nuts. Anyway, they had two trumpets, two saxes, two tenor saxes, and a baritone. And this arrangement that I'm showing today, I got out of a Hal Leonard. Hal Leonard publishes musical books. I had found a few arrangements of this online, and there was differences in some of the inner voices. The lead trumpet would be the same usually, but just some differences. Either it was with an alto thrown in, or the voicing was a little off. So the Hal Leonard, the guys I talked to, the Tower Power publishers down in Texas, and they were happy that I used the Hal Leonard version, because that for them is the right. They were concerned about me not using the right version. So that's what we're doing. We're going to take a look, and they're a little unorthodox in their approach sometimes, and we'll see that when we go through the score. So take it away, Fred. So in my arrangements, there's either going to be two trumpets and tenors in the treble, or the two tenors are going to be down here in the bass clef with the bari sax. So Tower Power is two trumpets, two tenor saxes, and a bari sax. So starting off in the intro, it's an 8-bar intro, and the top trumpet note here is a B. Our chord symbol is an E7 plus 9. So we voiced down, they went B, G natural, which would be the plus 9, D natural, which would be the flat 7, B is the 5th, and D right above middle C is the flat 7 as well, and that's the bari part. Okay, so then that's the intro. There's a drum fill here, doo doo pop and pop, and then in bar 2, this is a voicing of an A triad. So the top note is A, and then it just voices down as an A triad. And this is kind of modal in a sense, because kind of a bluesy modal thing, because the tune pretty much is just over the E7 plus 9, and it's blues derivative, if you will. So this A is a passing for the E. So we go to a 4 passing, and then the next note is a G a G natural, to voice this G. And so these are almost like alternating triads right here. Remember we talked about alternating triads over an E bass, okay, the way they function. And the G triad works great over this chord E7 plus 9, because the E is the plus 9, D is the flat 7, B is the 5th, G is the plus 9 again, and then G down here. But mainly it's functioning as a G, as a passing chord back to our E chord, which is kind of open. The top note is a B. Then it goes to a G natural, D natural. Here's our third, G sharp, and then down here, 2 octaves down, is the E. And in a lot of in the Tower Power, the baritone sax pretty much lives down in the middle of the bass clef and lower. Sometimes a little higher, like in this D here, but pretty much he's hanging out here. And this last voicing here is pretty open. They skipped the trumpets are up there, so they skipped the E. They didn't drop it down or anything. They just it's just kind of an open, more of an open voicing. trumpets in thirds, and the saxes are, this D and the G sharp are defining notes for the E chord, and then of course the bary's playing the root. And then in bar 4, we have the same thing that we have in bar 2. Bar 6 is the same. And in this last bar of the intro, we have this A chord again, but the trumpet, the lead trumpet, is playing a B natural. Okay, it works. It seems to work. And then we have our G. And then in this last chord, we open it up even further. They just moved. It's the same as what we had in this voicing here. They just moved this trumpet up on the B. They just moved him up to E, to a high E. And you can do that. I've done that before, where the rest of the horns are kind of down into a semi-open or closed voice, and you want that top trumpet to pop a high note. It works. It works. Anyway, let's take a listen to that. All right, I love that. Funky. Okay, so letter A, the vocal comes in. I don't start sections in the middle of the page. I don't like that. I see that constantly. It just drives me nuts. So start your sections at the left margin. Okay, so here we go. And so here is vocal comes in. Typically, I'd write on the parts vocal in as well as letter A. So here's a fill. This would be considered a fill, like we talked about in our arranging techniques. And so the top note is an E of this voicing. And remember, we talked about when you have the melody the root in the melody, you use a 6th or a 13th, depending on how big, what kind of chord it is. Your major 1 chord, it's a 6th, and your dominant chords, it's going to be the 13th. So here we have the root, the 13th, the major 3rd, flat 7, and then the major 3rd here in the bary sax. Semi-open. It's funny how you almost see a separation between their trumpets and their tenor saxes as they write this stuff. There's just a little bit, and I'm not sure whether they wrote, if one of the guys came in with a chart and wrote it. My hunch is that some of these voicings were, head arrangements where they stood around and tried to figure out the voicings among the 5 of them and did it that way. Had some idea of possibly, they wanted the fill to be da 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 da, and knew that's what they wanted. And then they just stood around and came up with a voicing. I'm not sure. I'd love to know the answer to that. Because some of these voicings are not exactly they're not textbook, if you will. So let's look at the, okay, and so on this one, here is an E13 with the 13th as a second voice, so we have a nice 3rd at the top, and then here we just drop down a half step. On this, with D in the melody, we just drop down a half step and then back up to the E again to the 13th voicing like we did here. And here's a half step slide, just like the passing chord that we talked about in the ebook, the half step slide. And that's what they did. So in the next second 4 bars of the verse, they basically did the same thing. Here it is. Identical. The rhythm is different. There's not as many notes. They just went da 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 da. That's what that is. Anyway, and then in the last 4 bars of the verse, they split into octaves. And here I made a note here. The tenor and the bary are playing the low E. First tenor is playing E above middle C which is prime unison with this E here that the second trumpet's playing, and the first trumpet's playing the E above. So basically this note and this note are the same notes, okay? So the trumpet and the first tenor are playing the same note. So basically what we have here is double octaves, okay, which sounds really good in this kind of music. And they just continue on down. It's kind of a blues scale. Well, here are the chord changes from E7 to C9, which is the root moving by a third. They go back up to E, and then they go to the 5, which takes us back to the 1 here for letter B. So so what they did was they just use octaves, and they go down the scale, starting on the 3rd, flat 7, 6, 5, G natural. And then this time, the Barry sax plays down an octave. You know, he could have played down an octave here. I don't know why. Maybe it builds it a little bit. So now we have triple octaves. We've got 3 octaves here going. So here's would be the first tenor, second tenor, but the Barry would go down. And then they play the same riff here, but in the end, they split off into a chord, which I've talked about many times, where you can have unison or octaves, and then at the end of the phrase, when they hold out the note, they split into a chord. I must tell you, in the book, in the Hal Leonard book, this B here was a sharp, and I just think it was a typo. Had to be a typo. You know, a lot of times in books, you'll find little discrepancies, and it's a B7 chord, so this had to be a B natural, a B sharp. They had B sharp, which is really, as we know, C natural. So this B7 chord is B7 plus 9. Is that a flat 13? Yes, it is, because the G natural is our flat 13, the D natural is our plus 9, and then we have B, which I forgot to put a B here. It should be tying over to another B right here. A is the flat 7, and then B is the root. So the only defining note we're leaving out of this chord basically is the major third, the D sharp. But the rhythm section has the D sharp, and it'll sound fine. You got a guitar player and an organ player playing the D sharp. And so it sounds, and I think leaving out that the major third here makes that section sound more gritty, you know. Okay, let's listen to that. Here's the first verse. What is hip?
So you wanna jump out your trick bag and ease on into hip bag, but you ain't just exactly sure what's hip. You started to let your hair grow, spend big bucks atop your wardrobe, but somehow you know there's much more to the trip. What is hip? Tell me, if you think you know. What is hip? If you're really hip, the past and the years will show you in a hip trip.
All right. Makes me want to dance. All right, so that's the verse. And then letter B, here we're in E. We're going to do a little climb up. It's going to go from E plus E7 plus 9 to F sharp 7 plus 9. And on the next page it goes up to G. So let's look at this. The top E7 plus 9, the top note is an E. So this time, you know, we didn't do the C sharp. We just went down to the 5th. Okay? So he went down to the 5th, skipped the G sharp here, okay? And so it's down an octave here, okay? And then the next note down would be the D natural, and then the G sharps here, and then the E, here's the Barry again down at towards the bottom of its range, playing the E natural. And so this just repeats. It's kind of an open, very open voicing. You know, they're not really doing, it's almost like they're doing a drop 3 here. You know, they have their 2 trumpets, and then the third voicing down is dropped an octave. So they're almost like doing a drop 3. So at letter B, we have the E chord, and basically that's the voicing that they use. It's very open on the bottom. This is a pretty much, this bottom here is a standard voicing for left hand for jazz playing. You know, with the root, the third, and the flat seven. That's a very common left hand voicing for piano, and then they just put the trumpets, and it works great. It sounds great. It's got a good shape. I mean, voicings have shape to them, so the shape here, it's a pretty good shape. You know, it's balanced. It's good. The voices are more spread out on the bottom, which is what you want to do to avoid muddiness. And so then we kind of hold the same voicing. Here's a half step slide. This is an F. This is an F chord, an F 7 chord with our root, fifth, flat 7, third, and root. And it just slides up to the F sharp, which is pretty much the same voicing. Okay, and then we go up to G. A G chord. I like this moving up to the minor third, and then here they drop back down in half steps back to the 1 again, which is this is the intro. But so on these G voicings, G is the melody. It's a G7 chord. They went down. They went G, and they didn't do a 13th for the E. They opted for the D natural here. A here is the 9th, and F is the flat 7, and then of course down a couple octaves is our Barry sax, living down in the basement all by himself. But it's fat and it sounds terrific. So all these bars are the same voicing, and then we move into we're in octaves. We're basically single octave. Well, it's, let me see here. It's this is a double octave. It's all double octaves. So both the trumpets are playing these notes right here. Both tenors are playing this middle section, this middle part, and then the Barry sax would be alone on the bottom. That's how you would divide that up, and that's how they did it. And then up to this G chord again. We have G on top, the root, the fifth, the third, the flat 7, and the root again for the Barry. And basically what we're doing is we're just sliding in half steps. Establish your voicing, and then just slide down in half steps back to the E chord. Okay? And then back to the E chord. This is the same as the intro. It's just the last 4 bars of the intro. The guitar plays over it. So let's listen to that.
You in a hip drill, maybe hipper than hip. But what is hip? You became a part of the new breed.
All right. That was great. Anyway, so now we're at letter C, we're into the second verse. And the fill, they've added these 2 fills. They've added something to the second verse. It's nice to build your sections as they move along. We didn't have these in the first verse, and they add them. And they're subtle because they didn't use the whole horn section. They just used the saxes. And that's something to remember when you have any number of horns. You don't have to use them all. Even if it's just 2 horns, you don't have to use both horns all the time. So here we have, there's a tenor, second tenor, baritone, and over the E7+9 chord, the first tenor is playing the flat 7, second tenor is playing the major 3rd, baritone's playing the 5th. as opposed to the, you could have played the E down here, but I guess the B made a little tighter, a little more closed, different color, a little more closed voicing. It's not a closed voicing, it's open, but it probably makes a tighter voicing than if they played this voicing here. So what we have here is, this is an A7 chord. So they go from E7 down to the 4, back to the 1. Okay, almost like a passing. It's almost a half step slide, except for this B goes down to an A, which is a whole step. But the D goes down to C sharp, and the G sharp goes down to G natural and back. So it's almost like 1 4 1, because it's you know, in one respect, like I said earlier, it's kind of a blues. It's a blues thing. You know, it's blues. And then in this is the fill that we had before in the first verse, but what we've done is they have opened it up more. It's pretty close to the same. They dropped the tenors are lower, and they basically have opened up the whole voicing a little bit more. The top note, the trumpets are still the same. The top note is E down to a D sharp, and then to an E again. And so we've pretty much done, is this a half step slide? Let me see. E down to D sharp, C down to C sharp down to C. I wrote it as B sharp, which is C natural, just so I could keep the voicings, the notes in thirds. So yeah, pretty much, except for down here again, he goes E. Oh, he goes to D sharp. So yes, it's a half step slide right here, and then the same voicing here when they go down another half step slide right here. So on to the second 4 bars of the verse. Pretty much the same, except this fill here is, they left off 2 16th notes. Oh, they left off these notes here. So instead of going da 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 da, they just go da 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 da. And then here is the same, identical as the first time we hit it. This last 4 bars of the verse. It almost sounds like the chorus. I don't know. I kind of divided the sections up to where the next section started here. This kind of feels like just like the end of the verse. So let's listen to the second verse.
You became a part of the new breed. Been smoking only the best weed. Hanging out on the so-called hippie set. Being seen in all the right places. Seen with just the right faces. You should be satisfied, but still it ain't quite right. What is hip? Tell me if you think you know. What is hip? If you're really hip, the passion is the show. You in a hip trip.
All right, and there you have it. This part was just like the other, you know, we go into octaves, double octaves, and then with our little open chord at the end, the B +9 flat 13. And this D section is the same as the B section. We have an open voicing. Here's our left-handed jazz piano voicing with the E natural G, just like before. And the end of this letter B right here, just like the last time, except they don't go bop, 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 bop. They don't fall back down. They just go da, 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 da. Okay. Okay, so now we're on to letter E, the bridge, and it goes to the 4 chord. Pretty common for a bridge. Goes 4 1 4 1. It just goes back 4 1 4 1, and then 5 at the end. Pretty typical progression. So what it does on beats 1 and 2, the trumpet has the A, and then the second trumpet has the 5th, the E. But look at this spread right here. Look at this gap. I mean, this C, little C, is the same note as one ledger line below. So there's this huge gap of a tenth, an octave and a third right here, which, the E to C sharp, I mean, they are a third apart, so it's a good interval, and it seems to work, in all the noise. I wonder what that sound like if you just had the horns play by themselves right there. If you would notice it, you would almost want to put, have the second tenor play the G natural right here, and then have this, just move this note, this E here, up an octave. No, I'm sorry. This E, instead of this E, second tenor would play this C sharp, and then the first tenor would play the G natural right here, the seventh. I mean, that's probably what I would do, but I can't argue with Tower Power. And what is hip? This is the hippest way to do it right here. Anyway, so that's what they did. And the baritone's playing the root, fifth. This is a nice voicing down here, actually, kind of open. C sharps, the A, they skip the A, the five. But so this works here. And basically all they did, they went down a whole step down to the G, just like what they did before. It's like the G over A. It's like you're alternating triads again right here. And then here, I made a note here. Tenor and Barry are playing the lowest one, and then the second tenor, and then both trumpets are on this line. So it's double octaves. We got double octaves going here. And then the saxes alone. 1, 2, 3. Ba-da-da-da. Ba. 2, 3. Really cool. And this basically just repeats on this voicing here. It's basically just over the E7. The first tenor is playing the fifth, major third, and the Barry's playing the flat 7. And we go down to a. This is down to like an A or an F sharp. This is almost like a 2 passing for the E. But it's in the key. It's in the key. If you're in the key, you're pretty good. So they wanted that top tenor to play B down to an A. So they just voiced it down, and that's probably what they heard, and that worked great. It's kind of an A chord, an F sharp minor chord. It's in the key, so it works fine. Here, and then basically this 2-bar idea just repeats again, except for the last bar of the bridge over the 5 chord. And I love how the tenors, I don't remember who, I think both tenors play this, and then the trumpets play this, and then at the very end, everybody splits. The Barry sax basically lays out for this bar and then just plays the last note of the 16th figure on 4 and da. So here we have our left-handed jazz voicing, root, major third, flat 7, and then the trumpets are way spread out above the tenors up here, playing that top E and that third, the root and the third. Good interval right here, nice 6th interval. It's funny about Tower Power how they do that. I'm noticing that the more I look at it, how they separate they look at it almost as 2 sections, the trumpets and the saxes. Okay, let's listen to that. See, I'm noticing a discrepancy here what I heard was ba-da-ba-ba-da, but this is what in the Hal Leonard public book, this is what I found. E and a 4 E and da 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 da. So I don't know. But what's cool about this little turnaround right here at the end is it really slingshots it. That's my own term, slingshotting the into the next section, which is basically the intro again. But it's really cool. 1 and a 2 and da-da-ba-da-da. It just really pushes it forward, just driving it forward into the next section. Really good. Okay, so this next section here is basically the intro again, the last 4 bars of the intro that we had before. And we're on to letter F, which is the 3rd verse, which is identical to the fills and everything on the 2nd verse. Actually, on the Hal Leonard chart, this is the sign, this is the DS. But I chose to just write it all out. I didn't want to go back to DS's and all that stuff with this video thing. But yeah, it just goes back to the DS and plays this through. This is the same. All this is the same. So far, we've done an intro, we've done a verse, a chorus, a verse, a chorus, a bridge, a verse, chorus. Now, we could have ended the tune there, but we could have just ended the tune right in here somewhere. But now they're going to go into some other sections. They're going to go into a little horn interlude that's fabulous, organ solo, and an outro, which really puts the tune on another level, makes it more epic. Anyway, so here we are at letter G. This letter G is just like the past voice, the same as the other ones, with our left-handed jazz voicing here, root, third, flat 7, 2 trumpets. And then here, on the last version, they would go ba-da-da-da-da, and then stop. This one they added going into this next section. This is what I would refer to as an overlap. And it's something that I don't know if I've talked about overlaps, but in arranging, it's really good if you overlap your section. Like this is a perfect example where they've done a pickup into this next section at letter H. Okay, so ba-da-da-da-da, then they went into the bridge. Well, this time they go ba-da-da-da-da, into the next section. So the way they voiced here, that we've established we're in G. So we just slide from G right back down in half steps back to the E7 chord. Okay, here I put E minor. And on these octaves here, notice that this is a little different. They put on this top note, the way they have it in the book is they have 2 trumpets, and the first tenor are all doubling these, and then the second tenor's got this line by himself, and then the the baritone has the bottom line by itself. And then we come up in here and we voice. These are sharp 9s because we got this over the G. Here's a G7. We've got the B flat, sharp 9, F natural, which is the flat 7, D, which is the 5th, F again, the 7th, and then the bary's playing the root. Now, I would probably, if it was me doing this, they're doing the 5th here on a D. I would have made that a B natural to really establish that chord and just taken it down a half steps. But this is the way they do it. It's probably a little grittier without the 3rd. I don't know. Maybe they thought it was too happy. So anyway, and those voices just move in a half steps right down into our next section at letter H. And at letter H, we're back to E. I like this movement going up to the G and then back to the E. It's really nice that they do that throughout the tune. So here we're at E, and we have the G natural, which is the sharp 9, the D, which is the flat 7, B, which is the 5th, and then the D again for the flat 7, and E is your root. Now, why they didn't play, I would have taken this 5th and I would have played a G sharp in here. So I don't know how they came up with these arrangements. But it sounds great. And, you know, the rule of thumb really is if it sounds good, do it. You know, that's basically the bottom line. If it's maybe they tried the major third in there and they opted for the 5th. They didn't like the color, you know, the way it sounded. So here we are with this voicing, and basically this voicing just drops down in half steps down to the C sharp 7, and it's a +9 too because we have this E natural here, the flat 7, the 5th, the flat 7, and the root down here 2 octaves down, or an octave and change. And then it down on the C sharp, and then it does the reverse. It just goes up in half steps back to the E. And the voicing this E voicing is the same as up here, so it's just the same, okay? And then they land on this big E chord where the voicings change. Look how open this is right here. Look how open that is. But there's plenty of support down here, and then they do a fall here. And then here we're into our organ solo at letter 9. I mean at letter I, where it's kind of a breakdown. It's like a relief. It's like we take a big breath at the breakdown here. Anyway, let's listen to that.
Think about it, y'all. Tell me if you think you know what is hip. If you're really hip, the passing years will show what is hip. Tell me if you think you know what is hip. If you're really hip, the passing years will show what is hip.
Okay, so now after the breakdown and the organ solo, we go for the big build at the end. So at letter J, we bring in the horns, and they're playing this 4-bar phrase in octaves. So it starts with the 2 tenors on top and the baritone on the bottom, and they repeat this 4-bar pattern twice, and then the trumpet comes in an octave above the tenors and plays above. Both trumpets play this line, prime unison, and then they split into octaves here. We play that phrase twice. And then we come in here and we play the same figure, but this time the trumpets go for this high D. So it's starting to get exciting. And then in the 3rd bar of this phrase, notice that the tenor and the 2nd tenor are playing like an C sharp and A. So it's almost like they're playing an A chord over the E pedal here. Okay, because the chord is E, Barry's playing the E, the trumpets are playing an E. And so they play a sus, almost like a sus4 idea, and then they go back to the +9 chord on the end of 4, going to the 4th bar of the phrase. And here we do basically the same thing, but this time they have added these 2 voicings, probably, well, they would have to have done it in an overdub. I think it even mentions that in the music, that they do that. So he's playing a high E, and then here is a A, okay, 2 octaves above this A. So again, and these guys are E and octave. So basically we have this A sus, this E sus idea, the 4, going to the 4 with the E pedal back, and then here into this last bar we're back to the E 7 plus 9, and then we hit this nice little chord here, which basically is the same as this. 4 ya ah, 2 ya ah, 4 ya ah, right there. See? So let's listen to this. Let's listen to the build, the start of the build. Here it is.
What is hip? What is hip? I'd like to know. What is hip? Is it in the style of your hair? What is hip? Is it in clothes that you wear? What is hip? I'd like to know. What is hip? I'd like to know. What is hip? What's a hip, y'all? Hey! What is hip? What is hip? What's a hip to y'all? What is hip? I wanna know. What is hip? What is hip? Hey! I wanna know what hip is.
All right, and then at letter K, we go back to the figure that we had at letter H. This new idea that came up after the solo into the last section, and we come into this again to end the song. So it starts here with our E9 plus 11, plus 9, and it just goes down chromatically to the C sharp. This is the voicing, exact same voicing that happened earlier. And then down to the C sharp, back up to, this should be a C sharp chord right here. Back up to the E, 7 plus 9. And this time, there's a fall off. Bow. And my finale wouldn't allow me to do it on the other ones. Only let me do it on the lead trumpet part and the bari part. But I would put them in for the individual parts. And then we go to the B. Everybody hits this whole note, pushes this whole note. So we have D, which is the sharp 9, G, which is the flat 13, A, which is the flat 7, D again, which is a sharp 13. Again, I don't know why somebody didn't play the major third, but that's probably what they like this better. And then B in the root. And then here we have 5 octaves back to the 1 chord. No third, it's just octaves, which really has its own sound. No third, no 5, no color, just at 1 note. And it's 5 octaves. Big as a house. Big as a house. Let's hear that. Let's hear the ending. And there you have it. What is Hip by Tower of Power.